The silence didn't just happen in 2021, it's happening again right now, and this time it's Oprah Winfrey, who looks like she's choosing her words a little too carefully, as if one wrong sentence could unravel everything that was once presented as truth.
I wanted to be clear because was she silenced? Were people telling her not to talk? That's why I said that. I said it for clarification.
It's not Mrs. O, because you were snookered by the biggest liars in history.
Oprah Winfrey has revisited that infamous 2021 Sussex interview. Here she was speaking to Vanity Fair.
I didn't want later to hear, well, no, it wasn't that. It really was that I was silenced. They wouldn't let me talk. So it was all for clarification.
Oprah Winfrey is officially done with Meghan Markle. Now, it is hard to be on Oprah's bad side, right? She has been dragging Gayle King around for 50 years, for 5 decades.
Oprah Winfrey has reflected on her famous 2021 interview in Vanity Fair retrospective. She explained that she didn't intend to be a bombshell interview and clarified why she had asked Meghan, "Were you silent or were you silenced?"
Oprah Winfrey sits down, calm, composed, controlled, but something shifts the moment that old clip begins to play. The clip, the one that didn't just go viral, the one that rewrote an entire narrative, the one where Meghan Markle looked directly at Oprah Winfrey and dropped a single word that echoed across continents: silenced, not quiet, not reserved, silenced, and suddenly, watching it back years later, there's hesitation. There's a flicker, a reaction that doesn't quite match the confidence of that original moment. Why? What changed? What is Oprah Winfrey seeing now that the world didn't notice then, or chose not to? Because here's the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to say out loud. When powerful people start explaining their past words, it usually means those words didn't land the way they were supposed to. And Oprah Winfrey isn't just remembering the moment. Oprah Winfrey is dissecting it, almost defending it. And that's where things start to feel off.
I've always valued independence. I've always been outspoken, especially about women's rights. I mean, that's the sad irony of the last 4 years, is I've advocated for so long for women to use their voice. And then I was silent.
Were you silent or were you silenced?
The latter.
That question, simple on the surface, devastating underneath. Were you silent or were you silenced? It wasn't just a question. It was a loaded trigger, a narrative switch, a moment that turned Meghan Markle's story into something far bigger than personal struggle. And when Meghan Markle answered the latter, the room changed. The energy changed. The entire world changed. But now Oprah Winfrey laughs nervously. Now Oprah Winfrey says, I don't know where the hell that came from. That's not confidence. That's distance. That's someone stepping back from their own words, as if they suddenly carry more weight than expected.
I don't know where the hell that came from. Whoop. Okay. I wanted to be clear because was she silenced? Were people telling her not to talk? That's why I said that. I said it for clarification because I didn't want later to hear, well, no, it wasn't that. It really was that I was silenced. They wouldn't let me talk. So it was all for clarification.
Bullshit, Oprah. You've literally just said what you should have asked. Were people telling her not to talk? You didn't ask that. You didn't ask that. You played into a lie. And as a result, your legacy is now trashed and you know it.
And suddenly the narrative shifts. This isn't just a throwback. This isn't nostalgia. This is a quiet ray examination, a second-by-second breakdown of what Oprah Winfrey said and what Oprah Winfrey didn't say. Because silence isn't always absence. Sometimes silence is strategy, and sometimes silence is damage control.
She has been dragging that dead weight around, and I am sure they are just platonic friends. I'm sure they've never explored each other's bodies. I'm sure she goes to bed with Stedman every night and she's happily in love. But Oprah Winfrey sat down yesterday with Vanity Fair, and Vanity Fair decided to play her an old clip of her interview with Meghan Markle from 2020.
Now rewind. Back to 2021, a global pandemic, the world locked inside their homes, fear everywhere, uncertainty everywhere. And right in the middle of that chaos, Oprah Winfrey sits down with Meghan Markle and Prince Harry for what would become one of the most watched interviews in modern history.
Kevin, she says it was all for clarification, but in that interview, she didn't push back at all. But it almost seems to me as now she's trying to walk away from that interview. How did you perceive that?
I think she's been haunted, old Oprah. I mean, it made me laugh over in America. I used to live in America, and shall we say, they have a different worldview to those of us in Europe and in your great country, Australia, as well.
It was framed as truth, raw truth, emotional truth, a tell-all. But within that 3.5-hour conversation, one moment just seconds long became the entire story.
The way Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have lived their lives. Now, I want to set this up because when you first watch Oprah talking about this, you don't really know where she's going. But the point she is making, and you will see it come full circle, is that Harry and Meghan are fools when it comes to the way that they believe they deserve a particular type of privacy and a particular type of protection. Oprah is one of the most famous women in the world, and she understood that the privilege of that comes with a certain sacrifice too, but a sacrifice that are very rich.
The exchange, the pause, the word, the ladder, and Oprah Winfrey's response almost celebratory, almost satisfied. But here's the question that refuses to go away. Why didn't it go further? Why didn't Oprah Winfrey ask the next question? Who silenced you? When? How? Because real investigation doesn't stop at dramatic answers. It digs deeper, it pushes harder, and yet that moment was allowed to breathe, to exist, to spread, unchallenged, and now, years later, Oprah Winfrey explains it. Not proudly, not boldly. Carefully, Oprah Winfrey says it was for clarification. Clarification or protection? Because clarification usually comes in the moment, not 5 years later. And that's where the cracks begin to show. Because think about this, if the moment was as strong as it seemed in 2021. Why does it need explanation in 2026? Why does Oprah Winfrey feel the need to justify a question that once defined the entire interview? That's not how confidence behaves. That's how revision behaves. And it doesn't stop there. Because buried inside this quiet revisit is something even more revealing. Oprah Winfrey admits that going into that interview, the goal was a win-win. A win-win. Not truth versus fiction. Not fact versus narrative. A win-win. That's not journalism language, that's negotiation language, that's image management language. And suddenly the entire interview starts to look different. Because if the goal was a win-win, then what happened to the tough questions? What happened to the follow-ups? What happened to the pressure? They never came. And now critics are asking what should have been asked then. Questions that feel louder today because they were never asked when it mattered. And then there's the silence again. Not the silence in the interview, the silence after. Because when Oprah Winfrey talks about this era now, something is missing. No warmth, no connection, no lingering bond with Meghan Markle, just careful wording. Careful distance. And in a world where every word is chosen with precision, what's not said becomes just as important as what is. Because Oprah Winfrey knows language. Oprah Winfrey built an empire on language. Thousands of interviews, thousands of moments. And yet here, with Meghan Markle, there's nothing. No affection, no familiarity, just neutrality. And neutrality, when it replaces closeness, isn't neutral at all. It's a signal. And the patterns don't end there. Because while the interview is being re-examined, the aftermath is also under the microscope. The deals, the projects, the numbers, the narratives that followed, and the numbers don't tell stories. The numbers expose them. Streaming results that don't match the hype. Projects that disappear quietly. A public image that once dominated headlines now struggling to hold attention without controversy attached. And suddenly, the entire picture starts to connect. The interview that changed everything. The moment that defined a narrative. The years that followed. The distance that grew. The silence that returned. Because this isn't just about one question anymore. It's about credibility. It's about legacy. And it's about whether that original moment, the one that seemed so powerful, was ever fully understood in the first place. And then the conversation shifts again, almost quietly, almost too quietly, into something that feels less like reflection and more like revelation. Because Oprah Winfrey doesn't just revisit the moment Oprah Winfrey starts revealing the mindset behind it, and that's where everything becomes harder to ignore. Oprah Winfrey explains the interview had been postponed multiple times, delayed, rescheduled, carefully timed, and by the time Oprah Winfrey finally sat down with Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, there was already a sense that this wasn't just another interview, it was an event. Something being prepared, something being shaped before a single question was even asked. And when Oprah Winfrey admits that the goal was to make the entire conversation a win-win, it lands differently now, because a win-win isn't about uncovering truth, it's about balancing outcomes. It's about making sure no one walks away damaged, and in a moment that was supposed to be raw and revealing, that intention suddenly feels like a hidden script running underneath everything. And once that idea settles in, the rest of the interview starts to look less like spontaneous truth and more like something carefully allowed to unfold, because the biggest claims about family tensions, about private conversations, about deeply sensitive issues were never fully pressed. No names demanded, no timelines locked down, no contradictions challenged in real time. And now, years later, those same moments are being debated, questioned, picked apart across platforms where the audience is no longer watching in shock, but watching with memory, with comparison, with context that didn't exist in 2021. And that's where the discomfort grows, because Oprah Winfrey is no longer controlling the narrative the way Oprah Winfrey once did in that moment. At the same time, something else becomes impossible to ignore, something quieter but just as revealing the absence of connection. Because when Oprah Winfrey speaks about Meghan Markle now, there is no trace of closeness, no echo of shared history, no sign of a lasting bond formed during what was supposed to be one of the most significant interviews of Oprah Winfrey's career. The language is neutral, almost clinical, and in a world where Oprah Winfrey has always been expressive, always warm with those Oprah Winfrey considers close, that neutrality feels intentional. It feels like distance, and distance, especially when it follows such a high-profile moment, doesn't happen without a reason. Then the conversation widens, pulling in everything that came after, everything that built on that original interview, everything that was supposed to extend that momentum, the projects, the deals, the public image, all of it now measured not by headlines but by performance, by numbers that don't bend to narrative. And those numbers tell a story that's far less dramatic but far more difficult to spin, because when platforms release data, when viewership is compared, when rankings are visible, the gap between expectation and reality becomes clear. And suddenly, the idea that the original interview created a lasting, unstoppable momentum starts to look fragile, because momentum that depends on one explosive moment doesn't always survive once that moment fades. And that's where everything circles back to Oprah Winfrey again. Because Oprah Winfrey isn't just revisiting a clip, Oprah Winfrey is confronting the long shadow that clip created. The question that once defined the conversation now feels like the beginning of a chain reaction that Oprah Winfrey no longer fully controls. And instead of defending it with certainty, Oprah Winfrey approaches it with caution, with explanation, with a level of care that suggests awareness that the moment hasn't aged the way it was expected to. And yet, Oprah Winfrey never fully breaks away. Oprah Winfrey doesn't reject the interview, doesn't disown it, doesn't directly challenge Meghan Markle or Prince Harry. Instead, Oprah Winfrey does something far more subtle and far more powerful. Oprah Winfrey reframes it, slowly, carefully, piece by piece, allowing the audience to reconsider without ever forcing the conclusion. Because sometimes the most effective shift isn't loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's the space between words, the hesitation before a sentence, the explanation that wasn't needed before but suddenly becomes necessary. And by the time the conversation reaches its final moments, the question isn't just about what happened in 2021 anymore. The question is about what that moment means now, after years of scrutiny, after conflicting narratives, after the distance that followed. Because if that interview truly represented a clear, undeniable truth, it wouldn't need this level of revisiting. It wouldn't need clarification. It wouldn't need careful wording years later. So what changed? Did the facts change, or did the perception of those facts shift as more information surfaced? Did the narrative evolve? Or did the confidence in that narrative begin to weaken under the weight of time and scrutiny? And most importantly, why does Oprah Winfrey sound less certain now than Oprah Winfrey did in the moment that defined everything?